So we finally got the reveal of the full spec sheet for the PlayStation 5. So let's take a look at it compared to the Xbox Series X. Now, if you tuned in this morning, noon Eastern time, 3 p.m. Pacific time, Mark Cerny came on and they did his deep dive into the PlayStation 5. It was extremely boring. I mean, for the regular consumer, for the regular person, it was really, really boring. I mean, if you're into the engineering and the architecture and all of the little details of all that kind of stuff, I'm sure it was pretty good for you. Probably learned a decent amount of stuff. That part wasn't bad for those specific people. You could tell this was their exact presentation that they were going to give at GDC 2020 before it got canceled, because it was obviously directed towards developers. So all in all, we got the specs, we got all of that out of the way now. There will be no more rumors, no more false insiders, no more speculation of how powerful the PlayStation 5 is going to be compared to the Xbox Series X. Now we know. So for people who don't want to get into the deep specs of things, you can obviously just quickly look at the numbers and kind of make a comparison of what's faster, what's not, what's more powerful, whatever. All that stuff is good and all that stuff is great to talk about, but at the end of the day, it probably isn't going to make that massive of a difference in terms of how the games run and how the games look. It really does come down to how the developers utilize these parts within each console. That can make the biggest difference on how well the games output when you're playing. But it is quite clear that the Xbox Series X is going to be the more powerful console going into the next generation. So let's start off here. Both gonna have a 4K Blu-ray optical drive. That's pretty obvious. That's good that they're both sticking to physical media, which is a great thing, I think, because I love physical media. But I mean, it's probably not going to be utilized as much as people are going to think, and then we're probably going to lose it going on to the next generation, next generation. They're both going to have 16 gigabytes of GDR6 RAM, so identical. Both the memory bandwidth, 448 gigabytes per second for the PlayStation 5, 10 gigabytes of 560 gigabytes per second for the Xbox Series X, or 6 gigabytes at 335 gigabytes per second. So they kind of have a variable there. They can get a faster speed and then get more memory out of it. Now they're both using that AMD Zen 2 processor. The PlayStation 5 coming in at 3.5 gigahertz. The Xbox Series X, as we talked about in my previous video, is going to have kind of two options. You can have it locked at 3.6 gigahertz, or you can unlock the cores and you can have some at 3.8 gigahertz, so you can get a little bit higher speeds there. Then we move on to the GPU, which is probably the biggest talking point from all of this. We got confirmation today that the PlayStation 5 will have less teraflops of raw compute power compared to the Xbox Series X. The PlayStation 5 running at 10.28 teraflops, 36 compute units at 2.23 gigahertz, and then the Xbox Series X running at 12 teraflops of compute power. They are going to be having 52 compute units at 1.825 gigahertz. So it's really interesting how to look at this. I mean, in terms of raw power, the Xbox Series X for their GPU is more powerful than the PlayStation 5. That's just that. The thing is, it all depends on how the developers are going to utilize this, because the PlayStation 5 with less teraflops has less compute units as well, but they're at higher clock speeds and they're going to be able to overclock these compute units. Whereas with the Xbox Series X, it is locked at 1.825 gigahertz, although there is more compute units and it just has more power in general. So I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how big of a difference you're going to see on the Xbox Series X games. Probably at launch, you're probably going to see somewhat of a difference, especially for the cross-platform games. But it will really depend on how the developers utilize the GPUs, which ones are easier for them to use, because you can pretty much guarantee that a developer is going to make the game for the most powerful GPU possible, and then they're going to kind of downscale it for the other platforms if they're cross-platform games, or they're going to find a sweet spot that fits both. So that's the thing. It's all dependent on how well the developers use the consoles, how well they use the hardware, and which one is just easier to develop for. One of the biggest things with the PlayStation 3 versus the Xbox 360 in that generation, why the Xbox 360 was so much more successful, especially at the launch in terms of how the cross-platform games looked on your TV, was that it was just so much easier to develop for it. Whereas the PlayStation 3 was just difficult to develop for. And you remember at launch, there were games that just looked terrible, had terrible resolutions because of that. So we'll have to see how this plays out going forward. Now, there was other stuff that came out. The entire presentation was literally just a technical dive into how fast their SSD is, how their audio works, and then that was pretty much it. There was a little bit of backwards compatibility talk, which was one of the most disappointing things to me for the talk. But for a lot of people, I mean, A lot of people aren't going to be playing PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 games, or even PlayStation 3 games on their PlayStation 5. So for them, it's not that big of a deal. But I was kind of a big hit for me because I was really hoping that the PlayStation 5 was going to be fully backwards compatible across all the generations of PlayStation so you could play your entire catalog. But apparently it's only going to be backwards compatible to the PlayStation 4, and there's only going to be hundreds. He said hundreds. I don't know if that means just over 100 or exactly 100 or whatever. PlayStation 4 games available at launch on the PlayStation 5 for you to play, which I think at launch is a big deal because if you think about it, if you look at the launch of any console, the launch games aren't that great. There aren't that many, and the ones that do come out are missing a lot of features. Specifically, if you look at things like sports games or shooters or stuff like that, they're a lot more dumbed down than what they are when they're released further on into the life cycle. So having that backwards compatibility, having that back catalog instantly available at the launch of these consoles, especially if they are up-res, if they are made to look better than their original games, is a big deal. And that's going to be a big selling point, I think, for a lot of people. So for example, the Xbox Series X gives you access to their entire catalog pretty much of backwards compatibility. Games from the original Xbox, games from the Xbox 360, games from the Xbox One. You're going to have access to games from all of those generations. And a lot of those games are going to get up-res to have higher resolutions, better frame rates, and overall just look better. I've said this many times, but original Xbox games that have the up-res and resolution and frame rates and everything on the Xbox One X just literally look like brand new games, and that is a big game changer, I think, going forward. So that lack of backwards compatibility for the PlayStation 5 could be a big game changer at launch. Now, the majority of this presentation, Mark Cerny spent on talking about the custom 825 gigabyte SSD storage drive for the PlayStation 5. Pretty much just talking it up about how fast it's going to be, how it's going to increase your experience when playing games with reducing load times, and it's just going to be a big improvement over the previous generations of PlayStation. And that the SSD was something that the developers wanted. It was something, the most requested feature for the next generation that the developers had asked for. So we went to a huge deep dive. This is why you can obviously tell that this entire presentation was meant to be shown at GDC for the developers. And that's why to the regular person like you or me sitting at home, found it extremely boring because, I mean, this wasn't supposed to happen. Coronavirus wasn't supposed to happen. GDC wasn't supposed to be canceled. So they didn't come up with a brand new presentation to stream for everybody. It was just what they were going to show off at GDC. But getting back to this SSD storage drive, I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's extremely fast, and I am definitely sure that's going to increase the amount of enjoyability we have when playing these games. I don't know if enjoyability is even a word, but the fact is, if you see a difference between like 0.35 seconds or 0.27 seconds between loading times of games, or between loading times of going to different areas in a game, that difference you're not even going to really notice. So the specific speeds, both are going to be fast. How much faster is the PlayStation 5 one going to be compared to the Xbox Series X? You don't really know. It may not even be that much faster. I just don't see a big difference between loading times between the two consoles. But I don't see how that is the main thing that needs to be focused on when talking about the next generation. We know SSDs are going to be faster than hard drives, than HDDs. And we know that having this is a big jump. PC has been experiencing this for a very long time now, so having this in consoles is huge. Now, one thing he did also say is that you can go out and buy off-the-shelf SSDs to put into your PlayStation 5. There's going to be a slot for that, and I think that is actually a pretty big win for PlayStation. I think that was potentially the better way to go compared to the Xbox Series X, because those will probably be cheaper. We don't know how much they're going to cost, these custom SSD cards that you're going to be able to plug it right into the back of your Xbox Series X. It's hard to say if they're going to be more expensive, and if they are more expensive, just how much more expensive they're going to be than the off-the-shelf thing. Because when you're buying off the shelf, you could find many different brands. You have so many different options that, I mean, you could definitely most likely find a cheaper price than something that's proprietary like this. Like I said in my previous video, we saw this with the PlayStation Vita, and we saw how that was a big game changer. A lot of people didn't want to go out and buy the PlayStation Vita because they had their own proprietary memory cards that were just absurd in price. So I'm really hoping that Microsoft learned from that and that they don't do that with this, and that these 1 terabyte cards are actually decently reasonable in the amount that they cost. So all in all, to break it down, the difference between the two consoles is the PlayStation 5 is going to be 10.28 teraflops of GPU power, whereas the Xbox Series X is going to be 12 teraflops of GPU power. The PlayStation 5 is probably going to have a faster SSD compared to the Xbox Series X. However, there's less storage on that internal SSD, and you're going to be able to buy off-the-shelf SSD stuff for the PlayStation 5, whereas with the Xbox Series X, you're going to have to go out and buy the proprietary SSD cards. The PlayStation 5 is only going to have backwards compatibility to select PlayStation 4 games. They set a catalog of over 100, so who knows what that means. That's going to continue to increase, or if it's going to stay at that. The Xbox Series X has backwards compatibility from the original Xbox all the way up to the Xbox One, which is a really good thing. And those original games on the original Xbox, and I believe also the Xbox 360, are up-res. They look better. They have better resolutions and frame rates. So what will this mean for the consumer? Which console do you want to go buy? I mean, it depends, obviously. For me personally, even in this generation, my platform of choice has been Xbox One because of the Game Pass, because of Xbox Live, because of all the things they've done with backwards compatibility. I just enjoy it more. It's not that I think it's better or I think it is the best thing out there. I just enjoy playing on it more. I still play my PlayStation 4, just not as much. But if you have to choose between one or the other, I think the biggest determining factor, honestly, at launch will be the price. And both of these companies have been silent on the price. And the reason they've been silent on the price is because they both know that these consoles are going to be expensive. Now, what I think is that if the PlayStation 5 is $100 less than the Xbox Series X at launch, like last generation, these specs aren't going to matter. People are most likely going to go out and buy that just because they want to save that $100. And we really saw that with the PlayStation 4 versus the Xbox One. Now, the biggest difference between this generation coming up and last generation was that the launch of the Xbox One was brutal with their marketing, with their PR, with their E3, all that kind of stuff. This year, they've been brilliant. Like, they have not missed once. Everything they've done, from announcing at the Game Awards, from bringing in Digital Foundry and Austin Evans to come in and try out the Xbox Series X, has been absolutely perfect. Worked out amazingly. So even with that $100 price difference, it may not be a big of a hit as last generation, but I do think if the PlayStation 5 were to come in cheaper, that would be a win for them. However, because they haven't announced the price yet, and what are we, March, and this comes out in the holiday season, so most likely November, December, potentially October, it's probably going to be almost as expensive, and maybe just $50 less than the Xbox Series X. And if it's only $50 less, or if it's the same price, I definitely think the Xbox Series X is probably the way to go, but it depends also what games they're going to launch with as well. The Xbox Series X, you know, is going to have the massive back catalog of games, as well as probably a game or two from one of their new developers. The PlayStation 5 has their staple of amazing first-party games. Like, they have some of the best, they probably have the best first-party games out there right now, so that will also sway into people's decision. But if they don't launch the PlayStation 5 with at least one or two of those first party games, people may just kind of forget about it and then think about that when they actually come out at a future date. But I don't know. I mean, me personally, I'm probably going to get both. I always do every single generation. I get everything. So to me, it doesn't really matter. These specs, it's not like I'm only going to choose one and not be able to get the other and play the other. I'm probably going to get both. That's just me because I do it every generation. But obviously, some people don't do that. Some people can't afford that. And some people don't want to spend their money on different consoles just to have the same thing because they all play games, right? But anyways, that's just what I think about this. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. Are you impressed with the PlayStation 5 specs? Are you going to pick up a PlayStation 5 based off of these specs, or would you rather get an Xbox Series X? I would really love to know. I would really love to create some discussion down in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you're new to this channel, and I'll catch you in the next video.